I made a joke about the low bar thing before. I was really just meant about we need more faith-filled Catholic men and women in the church and stuff like that. But it's the beauty of these vocations, the vocation of the religious life. You know what I mean? Whether it be being a priest, deacon, or a sister, and whatever form or facet. And then also the married life is what we're talking about today. And then there's also the vocation of the consecrated singlehood and whatnot. And so I think the audience knows this more or less, but I'm obviously I'm an outlier in this group because obviously you guys both are in serious committed relationships. You're in a committed relationship for the rest of your life, and you're planning on being pretty soon. You're preparing for that vocation. But something that I've done and in my preparation and my spiritual preparedness, and I want to see what you guys think about this, is create a list of like non-negotiables. You know what I mean? Things that, and then like the person needs to have. You know what I mean? And then the things that would be nice to have, but the things that basically I know, like, so I can be intentional in a season of singleness, for that, so that, when that person does come along, more or less. And like you were saying, Adrienne, before, not every person is going to be the right fit. Like, it's not to say that, because I feel like, in my discernment and in my conversations with the Lord in my life, that because I feel called for the vocation of marriage doesn't necessarily mean the next person that comes along is going to be the person that I'm going to, marry. Now, obviously, you're dating for that intention, but it's really like, that discernment process, and so part of that for me is creating that list of things, you know what I mean? And I'm sure, though, too, at the end of the day, like I said, there are things that would be nice to have, in a potential spouse, but obviously it doesn't necessarily mean that your spouse is gonna be every single I think that's probably an unhealthy thing to do. It's just for us to hold our potential spouse to a standard that might be a little bit unreasonable, you know what I mean? But I just wanted to see what you guys thought about, both of your guys' thoughts about creating lists and being intentional in that season of singleness as you prepare for to meet that person.
Did you write one?
I didn't. I think I was too young. No,
that's true. Yeah, fair enough.
No, but it's just like, I guess like at the time when Kyra and I first started dating, I remember this distinctly, and I told her this like when I was proposing to her, and it was just so weird how like I always kind of knew, like we always kind of knew, kind of had like this like. Just feeling for each other, or like I was in the point, like I was just back end, and I guess this may fit in, I don't know, but like as like a 12th grader in high school, like my intentions weren't to find my wife, I'll just leave it at that, those were my intentions, nor many 12th graders in high school. If there are, then like you are like you have a beautiful soul, like keep striving ahead, bless you. But that wasn't my intention, but there was a point where I kind of just stopped, and I kind of just was like, I don't like this search, or the person I'm trying to become, or whoever I'm trying to seek, just for my own fulfillment, all that kind of stuff. And once that stopped, a few months went by, and Kyra and I were always friends, and that's kind of when we just started, to talk a little bit more and be a little bit more friendly with and all that. But it was crazy because even throughout my kind of like adventurous life, as I try to try to seek out and just be like, a player, or just all that kind of stuff. Like I never told Kyra any of this kind of stuff, which is kind of weird to me.
Because you guys were friends.
We were friends. We were really close friends. We were best friends. I was best friends with her brother, and her and I were just like brother and sister. And I never told her really anything, because I just like, it's not like I did anything crazy, but it was just like I never told her when I thought a girl was cute, or I never told her when I thought like that I liked a girl or stuff like that. Like I never told her because I just felt like, I don't know, there was something special about her, something that like that this conversation, like I knew that what I was doing, what I was seeking wasn't right, so like why would I share this with this woman, I don't know, and it was just like when we first started dating, obviously like we just just like kids like like each other, you know, they attract each other and they have good times. And obviously we were friends and best friends before that. So, but when we got back together, you know, like, I think the most important thing and like the whole no compromise thing was like, you know, someone of their faith, you know, like trying to like finding someone who I can share my faith with and grow in my faith with. So like, I guess like I didn't really have a list, but I kind of knew at that point, you know, like if it was gonna be her, then like we had to like really fight for what, you know, what we believe in and stick together with it, and be intentional. So like, I don't know, I guess the whole list thing, that was never brought to my attention and all that, but that's a beautiful thing actually. And I would if I were to write one, obviously if I was single, like it would definitely be that, like the no compromises, like no, like the non-negotiables, like that's really good.
Yeah, what do you think about that, Adrienne, about like intentionality in that season of singleness?
Yeah, I think making the list is really helpful and fruitful. But like you kind of alluded to, okay, so preface, I had an episode with my boy Nathan Crankfield from Seeking 365, or not, Seeking Excellence at Seeking 365 on Instagram. But he brought this up because this is from Sarah Swafford, this whole kind of talk, and his wife actually, his fiance works for Sarah Swafford, I believe. And like the book that I always recommend to my teens, if they say like they want to, you know, commit or dating or, you know, whatever, prepare their hearts, is Emotional Virtue. And I think in that book is where they write she suggests you to write the non-negotiables, must-haves, nice-to-haves, and what was the other one? Like, cannot have or something like that. Something like that. Like, in any case, like it's very fruitful when you have something to look back at to keep you accountable. Like this is, this is like, cause you know, guys, man, we can get googly eyes when we see a pretty girl, you know what I mean? Like, we're like, oh man, she is so beautiful. She's so fine. And then you forget, you throw away all of the negotiable, you know, like your non-negotiables out the window to compromise for her. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Exactly.
Like, I guess that could fit, you know. That's okay.
We can fit that in. We can fit that in.
That can slide.
Let me do some calculations real quick.
Exactly.
It's crazy.
I mean, it's all. I mean, it's all guys, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not. I mean, it could be girls too. Obviously, I mean, it's not just a guy issue; it's a girl thing too. But having a list definitely will help you keep accountable. I myself never. Though I went to a talk with her. I think I don't think I did. But if I did have one, I didn't keep it handy. Like, I don't remember where I put it. Yeah, I probably put it in my prayer journal, like, way back when. And it's, like, lost within all the pages in there. But, like, in any case, it wasn't, like, something that I kept referring to when I went on dating, you know. But it is very helpful from what I've seen, from what I've heard. And some of the fruits of my friends, you know, came because they had... Like their marriages came because they had the list, you know? And again, something to keep them accountable and like, okay, like this girl is pretty, but does she actually like fit this list? And you put her name and you like kind of, you know, when you start dating, you start looking at this list again. Like, all right, well, she does check this off. Oh, but like, this was like my non-negotiable here. Like, that's a conversation you have. Then it doesn't mean like you dump the girl. If you like, you start talking or dump the guy, you start having this conversation. Like, hey, look, like I just want to get real with you. Like I'm dating because I want to pursue vocation of marriage, right? Right. And I have a list of non-negotiables for me that I did on this, you know, in preparation for this vocation, and this doesn't align with what I see from you. Can you disprove me, or like can we talk about it? You know, and just kind of do this. I mean, like there's so much fruit that can come from creating a list and preparing yourself for marriage and dating and engagement, that you'll be surprised. Just, you got to use it right. And then also to what you said earlier is to not live and die by it. Right. Like, I mean, like I'm saying things that you can, you know, you have to look at this person, but you don't have to nitpick. Like he or she doesn't have to fit every single thing on your list or, you know, whatnot, because if you do, then you're not, I don't know. I feel like you're worshiping the list.
Right. Yeah, and you're like I said, like I think you're holding someone to a standard that might be sometimes unreasonable.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. I think you have to have reason with those kind of things, and just within reason, and have those, like you said, have that conversation, have those dialogues that are so important in any relationship, is that communication and being transparent, you know, being clear with what you want. And so, I mean, that really came about for me, and that's something that I never really considered doing up until recently. And like, I'll just be vulnerable real quick. I felt like the Lord called me, at least in my estimation, to like an intentional season of singleness. And so within that, you know, and me and Age were fasting recently with a group of gentlemen in Exodus 90. And so within that, you know, I thought, you know, maybe this would be a good time if I really want to be intentional about this season, if this is what I feel like the Lord is calling me to right now, and being intentional in that season, then let me start doing, you know, really being intentional, you know, and really trying to do everything that I can to prepare my heart for, if that is the vocation that He's calling me to ultimately to do. So I only share that just to kind of hopefully help the audience and anyone who might be listening and watching. Hopefully that helps you, whoever you are watching. But let me bring something up, because as I mentioned before, this is small like Paul, and we do like to look at things through a Pauline perspective, right? Like look at things through the lens of Paul and his writings and whatnot. So I want to bring up scripture. Now, you guys, anyone who's watching right now, and if you've been to, you know, a Catholic wedding, or like a mass for a wedding, you've definitely heard, you know, Paul talk about love is patient, love is kind in 1 Corinthians 13. Like, that's a classic. Like, that's basically a must-have. You know, basically 99.9% of Catholic mass weddings, like, you know, have.
Did you have it, Adrienne? Did you have that reading?
I'm trying to remember. I think I had. No, we had ours. I don't know if that was our first reading or our second reading. Is the house built on sand versus the house built on rock?
That's a good one. I like that one.
I don't know. Is that Paul too?
I don't think that's Paul, but it's a really good. I wonder if that's
Ephesians.
Maybe it might be. Well, so so speaking of Ephesians, I have a verse from Ephesians 5, verses 25 to 33. So, like I said before, the 1 Corinthians 13 verse is amazing, and it gives you basically a textbook definition of what love should look like in marriage. But I wanted to go into Ephesians 5, which I think is really, really beautiful. And so it's Ephesians 5 verses 25 and on, and so it says here, "Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of the water with the word, so that he might be present with the church, so he might present the church to him in splendor, without spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that she might be holy and without blemish. In the same way, husbands should love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself." And it goes on, and it also talks about how wives should love their husbands, and so on and so forth. There's a lot of great stuff in Ephesians 5 about godly marriage. But I bring that up because Paul has a lot to say about marriage, for sure. He has a lot more than even just this to say about marriage. But I thought this would be beautiful to talk about, because within the vocation of marriage, and now Adrienne, you know, having been in it for a few months, and Age getting prepared for it, that's what we're called to do, is to submit ourselves to our spouse, to have that sacrificial love that Christ exemplified for us on the cross, right? We're supposed to, like there's a good quote by our friend Nico Cabrera, who came on a recent episode of ours, and he says, I don't think it's his quote, but he says it all the time. He says, "If your love isn't sacrificial, it's artificial." All right? And so that's, I think, a really good example of what a godly marriage looks like, of love that is sacrificial. And so when Paul talks about this in Ephesians 5, he literally says, "Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, that he might sanctify her," and so on and so forth. And I think that's a beautiful thing. So I wanted to ask you, Adrienne, you know, how you've been able to kind of learn about that in the beginnings of your marriage with Sarah, and also just, you know, how can Adrienne, you know, prepare himself for that same, duty, I guess, within the context of marriage.
Yeah, I think two things come to mind. obviously the self-sacrificial love it's so important, and everyone knows this. Like I did a podcast with all my groomsmen the day before my wedding, interviewing all the guys who were married.
I saw a little bit of it, bro. It's really good.
It's great. I mean, we're all like pretty tipsy and like talking about marriage, but you can hear the genuine, how do you say that word? Genuinity, whatever. Like they're so genuine. Authenticity. There you go. Authenticity in how they speak about their wives and what they want, what they've learned in their marriage, even though they've had a couple drinks, and it's great. And one of the things that, one of the things one of my groomsmen said, he said, if you want to know how selfish you are, get married. If you want to really know how selfish you are, have a kid. If you really want to know how selfish you are, have a kid with special needs.
Oh wow.
And the realization of how you're so used to, you spent 20 some years being just worrying about yourself. I mean, obviously you had your kid, you had to be, relying on your parents for a while, right? But then when you got to, teenagehood, being a teenager, and then you got into young adulthood, you're so just on your own accord, that when you get married, bro, it's a whole change. It's not just you. Obviously, this, but I knew this going in, and I think all guys know this going in, but you don't realize how much oh crap, I really got to change my mentality on this thing, or my timing on certain things. I got to go to bed earlier, or things like that, or trying to compensate for another person and not just myself. Yeah. And it's such a dynamic change in our lives that it's kind of hard to adjust to at first, but it is beautiful to do so. And one of the things I experienced recently, I was when we found out Sarah was pregnant, we were on our way up. It was a few days before we moved to South Bend to Indiana, making the drive from Florida here, and my stomach dropped. Dude, financially, am I going to be able to do this? Am I ready for this? Am I at a point of maturity to be able to raise a kid? I'm still realizing how selfish I am right now, and I need to get rid of that. It's obviously God that wants me to is helping me through that with this baby. And when we got here, our first few weeks, I was really struggling. And I think I shared this on my podcast, my most recent episode, but I was having this trouble with being helpless, for my wife, she was having this extreme morning sickness and not feeling well, and had to take her ER and things like that. But I could only do so much. There was nothing I couldn't help her. When she was throwing up, I was trying to do little things, but there was okay, where am I letting God do work, or where am I trying to take control of things? And I went to confession, and I just told the priest that what I was going through and all the things we were going through, that we were pregnant and stuff. And he said this thing to me. He said, you have to get used to the feeling of helplessness. I was like, what do you mean by that? Wow. And he said Christ himself was on the cross, helpless. Yeah, he could have done it, but he was helpless, and that's his vulnerability and his sacrificial love revolves around helplessness. When he comes down to us in the Eucharist, he's helpless. He can't stop himself. Yeah. And so he said getting used to that helplessness will bring you closer to Christ and bring you closer to that sacrificial love.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
And it was hard for me to swallow for a bit. I sat down in adoration afterwards for that, just kind of festering in that. And I look at this, three images that I love, right? Christ on the cross, right? We all know that. But the Pieta, Mary holding Jesus. Wow. And then this too, even Joseph sleeping. All of these forms of this imagery, they're all helpless in this moment. Helpless. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And getting used to that, I guess it's just understanding that Christ is who we need to rely on, and especially in this preparation, this time of life, and in marriage, everywhere. So it's not just like a marriage thing, I think, but it's definitely becomes more real when you're married, and more real when you're preparing and you're doing all these things to get to this point. And it's a beautiful feeling. But it's also so vulnerable, and sometimes you just want to like run away from it. So I don't know where I went with that, but basically I think helplessness is something key that we need to be aware of and be able to have in this time of life, especially when you're preparing for like having a kid, in marriage and stuff like that. So I don't know, where was the original question?
No, I don't know where it was, but thank you for sharing all that, man, because I mean, that was very vulnerable and just very honest, very true. I think I heard a quote recently that like marriage is not for those who are excited to get married, but those who are ready to get married. I feel like everyone could jump into marriage and engagement and all that stuff just because you're like, you want this, you want a family, you want this, but like you don't know what's coming. Like, like when you cut a loaf, you don't cut the loaf, eat it, put it in the pantry for yourself tomorrow. Like you're cutting that loaf for someone else. So it's just like it's a lot of that, so you got to be ready for it. It's not something that you like. Obviously, you can be excited for the vocation of marriage. I'm sure I'm excited for it. I'm sure you were excited for it. Oh, yeah. You have to have that sense of just like acknowledgement of that, what you just said, be ready to be helpless,
Yeah. And I think to speak to what you were saying, Adrienne, good. I think, Paul talks about it too. And I think embracing that helplessness is so important, because when we are weak, he is strong. It is in our weakness that the Lord, his power is made perfect in our weakness, right? So if we can embrace that weakness and realize, okay, it's okay that I'm helpless in this aspect of my life, but this is where the Lord is going to continue to work on me and to mold me and to be able to have that give and take with my spouse in this case, and so it's okay to embrace that, because we're human and we are going to be helpless at points. But how is it that we, within that moment, embrace that helplessness and then respond to it, and come to rise to the occasion too, you know what I mean, when you can, and as the Lord molds you in that. So I think that's great, bro. Yeah, man.
And I think the last thing I'll say to all of this is just that, when preparing for this relationship or for marriage, obviously communication's big. It's even bigger when you're married. And so keeping that conversation that you have had leading up to the marriage, when you were dating, when you were engaged, keeping these conversations going, and the respect obviously for one another in marriage is so key. And that's part of the sacrifice is, like you feel like, oh yeah, we're married now, mission accomplished, check box, no more growth. But that's absolutely not the case. And so part of that sacrifice, part of that helplessness, I guess, is also just keeping the conversation going and keeping the desire to love and to serve and to, to keep learning and to love better, open with communication between you and your wife and your spouse in general. And to say, hey, maybe just having a normal conversation once a month or once, maybe 4 or 5 times a year, like however often you want to do it. Like, hey, how can I love you better in this season? And just having that open dialogue often, I think will be helpful for Age, for you and Kai, but also for anybody out there who's preparing for that sacrament. So.
No, I can speak on that. That's so important. And like as you guys are talking about, like when you guys were talking about the whole non-negotiables and the list and all that, like in the back of my mind, in my head, I was thinking like, I guess like we had a list, but our list was kind of curated through time. Just like being together, like we kind of had to understand what worked for each other, because we knew at the end of the day, like we wanted to be with each other, and we knew that, like only God can make it work. But like we had to be vocal. Like how you said, we had to communicate like what were our desires, like what do we desire in our spouse, in our future spouse, in our significant other, like what do we seek, and what do we need, and because like obviously like all your desires can't be fulfilled, you know. It's like kind of putting like a trophy wife or trophy husband, like it's just if you can't like fit those details, then why should anyone else fit those details for you, you know? So it's like you can't be a trophy husband. Don't look for a trophy wife, you know. You guys gotta meet each other. You guys gotta meet each other. Yeah,
that's a good point.
So yeah, like the whole listening, like the whole communication, like it's huge, and like that brought us to the point of engagement. Obviously, like if we didn't learn how to communicate, you know, we would have never, you know, we've never been to the gone to this point. Sorry. So that's so huge, and I can't wait to continue that. Like just be open, like just floodgates, like everything, like just be so vulnerable with your significant other, your spouse, your wife, your fiance.
That's amazing. It's
so important.
No, and like important. Speaking to that, what you just said, so quick one. I just thought that I remember, I forget who said this, but I'd heard someone talking about like in that place of, you know, even in that preparation, you know, for you know, becoming engaged, and then in that engagement process before marriage, but even in the process of being single, it's like, okay, you know, a lot of times I think we're fixated on, oh, what can this person do for me? But it's just like, okay, how can I create myself to be the best version of myself, to be the best potential husband for my future wife one day? So like, that's like something that I'm trying to do in my season of singleness, is like, how can I work with the Lord and on a daily basis, and my daily habits to grow as a man, so I can be worthy of the person that I want to one day potentially call my wife, you know, or whatever it may be. But you know what I mean? It's just the same thing in that process of dating too. It's like, how can I be better? Like a lot of times you're like, oh man, whatever they can give me, like, oh, I want them to do this and this, okay, but what might they be expecting from me to grow in that place? You know what I mean? That
it's literally a talk, you know, like I feel like I'm a firm believer, like those kinds of things in relationships shouldn't be, you know, things that you're just guessing, you know, like, oh, how can I figure this out? Like that's a conversation, like your desires need to be out in the open, you know? I think, you know, I struggled a lot trying to figure that out on my own, you know, trying to, you know, please Kyra with just, you know, things that I said, things that I did, or gifts, or things like just little things like that like, or just the ways that I acted, or, you know, it was just like little things like that I was just trying to guess, and trying to figure it out, which is not a bad thing. Like that shows intention, but like if you really want to hit in the nail, have that conversation. Like what do you desire? What are you looking for? Like how can I meet that? Those requirements, you know, because I obviously, like, I'm so about this relationship that I want to meet them, you know, and I'll do everything to meet them, you know. Obviously I'm gonna fail, you know, all that, but you know, like I'm gonna be right there trying to fulfill, like, you know, your needs. So I think that conversation is so important.
It's a lot. I mean, two things, like to follow, you know, like to affirm what you said, Ricky, like, or to add to what you said, Ricky, like when you're prepping yourself for that marriage vocation and stuff like that, and figuring out how you can be the best version of yourself for your spouse, it can look so many different ways. It can look spiritual. It can literally look like physical, like being healthy, or, you know, like getting consistent in some sort of routine, a diet, whatever, like working out. Like it can look so many different which ways, you know. Right. But and then to age, like just kind of continue our conversation, like our I don't know, like add to that conversation there is that, you know, with communication, right, there's and being able to display your feelings about certain things and what you desire, it involves a lot of vulnerability, you know. And again, that vulnerability again equates to like helplessness, you know, like I need to show you my heart, even how broken it is. And it goes back to my like favorite quote ever by C.S. Lewis. Have you guys ever heard of read his book, The Four Loves?
No, but I've heard a lot about it, actually. I want to get into it. I love C.S. Lewis.
he wrote this book, and it's really good. But the quote that I always think about in my ministry and in my relationships, friendships, whatever, it's so beautiful. And he says, "To love at all is to be vulnerable." He goes on to say, "Love anything, and your heart will be wrung and possibly broken. If you want to make sure of keeping it intact, you must give it to no one, not even an animal. Wrap it up carefully around your hobbies and little luxuries. Avoid all entanglements, and then lock it up safe in your casket or coffin of your selfishness. But in that casket, safe, dark, motionless, airless, it will change. It will not be broken. It will become unbreakable, impenetrable, and irredeemable."
Wow.
To love at all is to be vulnerable, right? To love your spouse, to love anybody, you have to show your heart. You have to communicate these feelings. You have to be helpless. Being vulnerable is the consistent part of Christ's, like how he shows himself to us, like that, again, on the cross, in the Eucharist, like it's often in helpless and vulnerable states. And if we really want to love our spouses, each other better, or prepare ourselves for marriage, is to become used to vulnerability, becoming used to that helplessness in communication.
Yeah, bro. That quote, that I have to look that up, and I might have to read that book now, because that is fire. I mean, C.S. Lewis always comes with the flames, but Adrienne, as we're wrapping this up, and this has been so good. So good, man. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today. I wanted to ask, and this is for both of you guys, if either of you guys have any stories or last tips for the audience to kind of illustrate the things that we're talking about. Any last words that you guys would say regarding this preparation for this vocation, or preparing for vocation in general, discernment, anything along those lines, either of you guys?
I guess my last thing is to not worry yourself about the details. You know what I mean? Like, that's just anything when it comes to marriage prep. Like, my mind just goes back to like prepping for the marriage, like the wedding. Like, bro, just don't sweat the details.
I know. Well, it's the easy guy thing to say. You know, it's like
I was the one who was so detailed. Like, I felt like we were both so detail oriented, and we wanted things a certain way. I mean, like, some things we didn't care about. You know, like, we're like, whatever. Both of us are kind of like that. But there's some times where you're just like losing your mind over a little thing. I'm like, bro, like, what am I doing? Like,
I know. It's like, it's
about the vocation, bro. It's about the vocation, not about. It's a sacrament. It's not about the freaking dish tables or whatever. Like,
I know. I was talking to Kyra about it, and we kind of came to that conclusion. It's like, listen, like I'm gonna focus on you, and you're gonna focus on me, and like we're gonna get through this. Like, you know, we're gonna enjoy every step of it. And like she was just saying that, like, literally 2 days ago here at my house, like, she was talking to my mom about it. And she was like, because it got stressful. It got really stressful towards the beginning. So like anyone who's preparing for marriage right now, like, just like, you know, getting the church, getting the venue, like, you know, it's venue. It's in the church here we do two different things. We can't just pick one venue and get married there. We gotta do two. So that's like the hardest part, is getting them on the same day. So that was like super stressful, and like all that, and like obviously we have our all desires and stuff like that, and of like making the most beautiful wedding. And she said it perfectly the other day, and I think I said it earlier in this episode. She was just saying, you know, like I don't want to focus like so much on this and all the details just for like that one day, because it's just gonna go by just like that. You know, like I want to enjoy this process of engagement. And I was like, let's go. Yeah, let's do it.
You're like, that's why I'm trying to get married with you, girl.
That's why she's the one.
I was gonna say it to her earlier. I was gonna say, if I had made a list, I mean, God bless me already, but like if I had made a list, I would have ended up in the same spot anyway. So,
jeez,
I'm chilling, man. I was blessed.
Kai, we love you.
We blessed, bro.
We love you, Kai. Thank you so much again, Adrienne, for coming on and joining us, man. You blessed us with some knowledge and some wisdom. Yeah, man. So as we wrap up, where can they find you? We'll include everything in the details below in the what's it called?
Description.
The show notes. Yeah, the description.
Description.
Yes. Sorry, people.
Show notes, description, whatever you want to call it. You can follow.
Yeah,
Bring me the show notes.
Yeah,
All right, go ahead.
yeah. Follow myself, my personal account. It's only Adrienne. It's differently spelled than our Adrienne here, the host of Small Lake Fall. It's spelled the feminine way. And
Come on, man. Don't do yourself like that.
it's this or French, whatever you want to say. Anyway, yeah, you can follow me at It's Only Adrienne. The reason behind that, just a little side note, is because my last name is Adrienne Garalde. We're both AGs, you know. But
Yeah.
Adrienne Garalde, every time when I had it as Adrienne Garalde on Instagram, I would like people's stuff and they'd be like, oh, Ariana Grande. Oh, it's Adrienne. so I changed it to It's Only Adrienne. And then Living Ardently on social, TikTok, and all that stuff. YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to our channel too. We put our podcast, and we're gonna be adding like other YouTube only content, which is gonna be cool. And our podcast is available everywhere else.
Yes, guys. Make sure you guys go as soon as you're finished with this video. And as soon as you're done subscribing to our channel, make sure you go subscribe to Adrienne's channel as well on Living Ardently, and follow them everywhere. Their content is amazing. It's really uplifting and encouraging, faith-filled content with great people of witnessing, just similar to stuff to what we're doing here, you know. So it's just an honor to have our brother Adrienne on with us today. And so like I was saying before, guys, make sure, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to our channel, like, and let us know what you think below in the comments about this episode. Any tips that you might be able to give other people, if you're already in the sacrament of marriage, or you're preparing for it, let us know what you guys think. You can add to the conversation as well. And thank you guys just for joining us today. We really so appreciate you guys and all the support that you can give us. Make sure you guys share this with someone else that might need to hear this. Share it on your social media and whatnot. And you can find us everywhere at Small Like Paul. Thanks again to our guest Adrienne for joining us today. And guys, as always, just go out there and live life small like Paul, because in order to become great in the eyes of God, you must first become little. We love you guys.
Love you guys. Take care. Make
God
sure
bless.
you
Thanks,
put down
guys.
in the comment down below any of your like engagement or marriage stories, or
Oh,
any questions, any other questions you got. We want to know about these things. We
Yes.
poured out an hour of just our own vulnerability, so we want to hear from you guys. If you're so willing.
Yes.
Let's do it.
See you guys.
We love you guys. See you guys next time. Peace.
Peace.
I'll never be alone, I'm with you. You're closer to my heart than I knew.